Advance. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan, sitting here not in our normal place. Usually we're kind of out and about, but today we're in the closed set of our Real Texans set, where we conduct our conduct interviews every Sunday. You can find those. I'm joined, of course, today with Brandon Waltons, as I usually am on these Tuesdays, except for I'm not around. Brandon, you've been around for all of them. I've managed to
That's
miss,
true.
miss
That's
a couple
true.
of
The real advance
schedule.
heads know that. They're keeping track.
Everyone,
keeping
people
tally.
keep track. Brandon is the undisputed winner of being truly on the advance. Okay, so Brandon, this week is maybe the most anticipated week of the session, if only because we had the last year and a half, 2 years focused around school choice by the governor. And now in the Texas House, on the calendar for tomorrow, is the debate on school choice.
Yeah, it's the most anticipated day of the session since the last day of the last special session. You remember in 2023, 2 years ago, the last session, they were called back multiple times for a number of issues, but at the heart of it was for school choice, which culminated in finally a school choice bill getting a vote on the floor of the Texas House, and a minority Republicans joining with Democrats, stop me if that sounds familiar, to stop the policy, right? And since that moment, we've seen massive turnover in the Texas House. It became a driving issue, particularly for Governor Greg Abbott in the primaries, to replace a lot of the Republicans who opposed his school choice initiative last time with new members. A lot of those people are in there now, so that's a big reason why you've had a lot of turnover. And so when you look at the breakdown now, on paper at least, looks like, okay, school choice should have the support. It has a majority of members, authors, particularly this version that passed through the Senate that's now getting voted on the House Senate Bill 2. Certainly has some critics on the right for different aspects of it. Maybe it doesn't go far enough, or people concerned about what it might do for private schools or homeschooling. But while it has a little bit of criticism there, we've seen that the Democrats have made this essentially their driving issue that they're going to be pushing against this session. That's actually why you had some of the more progressive members of their party actually vote against the budget last week, not because it was a massive state budget that grows government, right? Like some of the conservatives voted against, but some of them voted against the budget because they said, I don't want to fund a budget that funds school choice, even if it's just to the tune of $1 billion, which is what these proposals are. Pretty small when you compare it to the funding that schools get, public schools do get in Texas. So, this $1 billion school choice program in the next biennium here, that's what's being talked about. And that's why there's so much anticipation when you look at it's now on the calendar for Wednesday. There's a lot of questions about, okay, if this is a big fight for the governor and Democrats are going to make this their big issue that they're going to push back against, what's that going to look like? How's that going to play out?
Yeah, so I'm going to step back on one thing you just said. In many ways, the Democratic Party in Texas has defined itself in two issues over the past, call it 10, 20 years. Issue number one, opposition to school choice. The Democratic in Texas at the state level, working in the Texas House, they have defined themselves as opposing school choice. They're the ones who were stopping school choice. That's how they define themselves. Right? And the second has come to define them is the transitioning of children, allowing healthy, otherwise physically healthy children to have body parts chemically or surgically adjusted for the purpose of appearing to be the opposite gender. That's the other thing they've defined themselves on. One, stopping school choice. Two, the mutilation of children. So that's the Democratic Party, at least as it exists at the House level. And so tomorrow you've got this debate coming in the Texas House, going after, square on that defining characteristic for them. And it does make you wonder, are they going to try? I know there's a great article that Brandon wrote up at Texas Scorecard right now.
Which one?
Yeah. Okay, a little ego coming through there, Brandon. Got to check that. Now, looking at the school choice debate tomorrow, and you make kind of a casual mention to kind of the rumors around the Texas House. Explain kind of the historical significance of it.
Well, there's some talk about how are Democrats going to push back against this? Are they going to just draw out debate so that it lasts until the early hours of the morning? Very possible. We've certainly seen them do that.
The budget went until 3 a.m.
The budget went until 3 a.m. That as is
with all the controversial stuff from the conservatives stripped off. Basically.
Yes. But you can look back historically and say, okay, when Texas passed a ban on sanctuary cities, Democrats drew that late into the night. This is not something that's without precedent. But at the same time, this is just a practical consideration. This vote is coming Wednesday. That's less than a week after they stayed up till 3:15 in the morning for the budget. There's literally a practical consideration about how late do they want to do it again a week later, right? We'll see. But there's another school of thought that's saying, well, what if the Democrats just don't show up? And this, of course, people have a memory of this happening, just a few years ago. Remember when Democrats fled for Washington, D.C. To stop consideration. But they don't need to go to another.
That was election integrity.
Yes, that was on election integrity legislation, something that they've also been, pretty vocal against fighting. But maybe not even as much, arguably, as they have been against school choice. So the question is, okay, will they try to do something to deny a quorum, right? You need 100 members, 2/3 present to have a quorum in the Texas House. And could Democrats just not show up? Doesn't mean they have to fly to D.C., by the way. Will they just not come to the Capitol, right, and delay the bill for the day or for the week? There's some talk about that. I think the one thing that is pretty clear from talking to folks is that Democrats are not. It's very interesting. We talk a lot about Republicans and the different factions of Republicans. But inside the Democrat Party, there's factions as well, too. And you've got sort of the more progressive people, I think, who are some of the newer members who say they want to fight. Those are the people who are more apt to say, let's leave, let's make a big fight. You have some of the older Democrats who are just as liberal as their counterparts, but are more tied into leadership. These are the people that are the vice chairs and chairs of subcommittees and things like that under Dustin Burrows. Those are people who are less apt to rock the boat. And so, we'll see what happens. I don't even know that Democrats know right now what they're going to do.
Yeah, and in many ways, structurally, it is a harder lift today than it was in 2021 for them to get enough Democrats to break quorum. They would need 51 of their, 63, 64 Democrats in the House to leave. That means, and you can kind of look through at all these Democrats have been given these very now suddenly powerful vice chair positions, chairs of subcommittees, who don't want to risk that. And there's enough of them sitting there that 48 might leave, but 48's not 51.
Right.
They really need that number. All right. So today is the 92nd day of the legislative session of 140. Dan Patrick yesterday put out a statement. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Dan Patrick put out a statement which really laid out the numbers of this. I actually have it pulled up here. I won't read all of it, but some of these numbers are pretty interesting. We talk a lot about, especially over the last couple months and in the advance, where we've said repeatedly, okay, well, the Senate is passing XYZ thing, and the House is doesn't have anything scheduled this week.
Right.
Well, now we're starting to have bills scheduled, but even then, these calendars are small. They're 5, 6, 7 bills, right, a day. Just yesterday, they were, passing a resolution to make the tomahawk ribeye the state steak of Texas, right? Meanwhile, they haven't addressed property tax relief. They haven't addressed the border, taxpayer-funded lobbying, any of that. And Dan Patrick is taking notice. He put out a statement yesterday, essentially saying that the Texas Senate is prepared this week to wrap up almost all of its 40 priorities, which is pretty amazing because if you recall at the beginning of the session, when Dan Patrick said he'd had 40 priorities, my thought on it was 40 priorities, that's a lot of priorities. Like if you have 40 priorities, are any of them priorities? But in this case, they did prioritize them, right? They're going to pass almost all of them by mid-April here. They've passed 392 bills over to the House as of last week, including 32 of the top 40 priority bills. The Texas House, meanwhile, has only passed 23 bills over to the Senate. The Senate has passed more than 17 times as much legislation over to the House as the House has to the Senate. And Dan Patrick saying, Dan Patrick's somebody who I think has done a fair job of giving Speaker Dustin Burrows some space, some room, especially on the issue of school choice. They've actually been at events together with Governor Greg Abbott, something he had certainly not really seen a lot of during the Dade Phelan era with Dan Patrick and Dade Phelan. But even now, he's saying, look, Dustin Burrows is saying the right thing publicly. He's even saying the right thing privately. But the clock is ticking. It's time for action, and the results are going to be evident here in just 6 weeks.
And let's be clear, when you talk about that disparity of numbers, right? Talk about the numbers passed with the Senate, numbers passed with the House. I think that many folks would be less concerned by those numbers if all of what the House passed had been, on point conservative Republican Party priorities, activists demanded, but they're not. They're in many ways kind of piddling items that have very little in the way of broad appeal. And you can maybe criticize some of the things that the Texas Senate had, that's in that big bulk of 300 pieces of legislation. But at the end of the day, a lot of those were also kind of embedded the Republican Party priorities and the conservative movement's priorities.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's why I say you just look at yesterday. Okay, we designating April as Gifted and Talent Students Month. Well, that's great, but is that really a priority? Renaming highways, they're doing things like that, and they're doing just 7 or 8 at a time, and so that they really aren't spending a lot of time on any of this. It's important to mention too, I think, before we go here, that we are on, like you said, the 92nd day. This really is starting to mean that we're hitting up against some practical deadlines, if not the actual deadlines, which are coming up for when the House can pass a Senate bill, when a bill needs to come out of committee, all that. But from a practical sense, we are now at a point where if a bill has not been at least heard in committee, and I would say really needs to be voted out soon, then its chances of passing are very, very low. And that's why you see different grassroots organizations, different activist group out there right now saying whatever their issue is. You see border security groups saying, okay, well, E-Verify hasn't had a committee. We need to have, E-Verify needs to move out of committee. You see protecting Texas children out there saying that they want to see their priorities moved as well. This is now sort of this week and next week is that time where, look, if a bill hasn't gotten out of committee, probably not going to be passing, at least during this regular session.
And in many ways, these deadlines, while some are constitutional, some are rules, some are kind of practical, almost all of them fall much more directly on the Texas House and the Senate. The House is a bigger chamber, they have a lot more moving parts. Therefore, things have to be done in much more close. The Texas Senate has a lot more flexibility and can be more nimble as you get to the end of the session. I think the deadline currently is, or the deadline is set for something like May 26th is the last day, theoretically, for a committee to pass out a House bill. But what that means is it will be at the tail end of the legislation that's not actually considered.
Yeah.
So to your point, something really has to pass in the next 2 weeks if there's a serious chance for it to go to the Senate and work through the process.
Absolutely, and those deadlines are really starting to approach. It's just like Lieutenant Governor Patrick said, the clock is being eaten up right now. The Senate has been working. The House, as we have recorded, just has not, right? I mean,
they've been active. They just haven't been working.
Well, they've been active lately, but you look at you look at what happened in January and February, and into March, where they took their time appointing committees. They took their time actually having committee hearings, and then we went through the entire first 60 days without any of the governor's emergency priorities being considered, essentially rendering them moot. The fact that he made them emergency priorities was essentially the House saying they didn't care about the governor's priorities, I would say. So we're really at a point now where the clock is going to matter. All
right, well, speaking of the clock mattering, today is April 15th, as we noted at the outset. Came across a survey from TurboTax. 1 in 4 Americans wait till the last minute to do their taxes. So if you're one of those, if you're of the 25%, Bubba, the clock is ticking on you. Hopefully you're not one of those cats. But thanks for joining us today on The Advance. We look forward to seeing you next week.
you.